I don't know if I can do this. It's too much.
You can figure this
Together, just focus on the next step. I don't know how much longer I can keep this. It's too much pressure.
You need to find a way to manage this. You're not alone in this.
Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to Hopeful and Soul Stories. Today, I bring you a powerful and deeply loving story. The rain hammered against the windows of the lawyer's office as Olivia Carter stared at the divorce papers spread before her. Each word on the page felt like a dagger, carving away at the dreams she once held so tightly. Across the mahogany desk sat Julian Pierce, his jaw set firm, his eyes refusing to meet hers. The man she had fallen in love with 5 years ago now felt like a stranger wrapped in an expensive suit. Olivia's hands trembled as she picked up the pen. This was it, the end of everything they had built together. The end of late-night conversations, shared laughter, and whispered promises. The silence in the room was suffocating, broken only by the steady tick of the grandfather clock in the corner and the scratching of pen on paper. She signed her name, each letter feeling heavier than the last. Julian reached for the document without a word, his signature joining hers in what felt like a final act of betrayal. When he stood to leave, Olivia wanted to scream, to beg him to stay, to fight for what they once had. But pride kept her silent, just as it had kept them both from truly communicating for months. The door closed behind him with a soft click that echoed like thunder in her chest. Olivia sat frozen for several minutes before gathering her belongings with shaking hands. The receptionist offered a sympathetic smile that Olivia couldn't return. She rushed to the bathroom, slocking herself in a stall as tears finally broke free. It was then that she remembered the test in her purse. The pregnancy test she had taken that morning, still wrapped in tissue paper, hidden away like a guilty secret. With trembling fingers, she pulled it out and stared at the 2 pink lines that had appeared hours earlier. 2 lines that changed everything. 2 lines that came too late. Olivia pressed her hand against her stomach, feeling nothing yet, but knowing life was growing there. A piece of Julian that she would carry forever, even as he walked out of her life. The irony was cruel. They had tried for a baby during their marriage, had filled out adoption papers, and visited fertility clinics. And now, when everything was falling apart, nature had finally answered their prayers. But she couldn't tell him.
Not now.
Not when his face had been so cold, so distant. Not when every conversation over the past 6 months had ended in arguments about his work, her feelings of abandonment, and the growing chasm between them. Julian had become consumed by his business empire, leaving Olivia to wonder if she had ever truly mattered at all. She tore the test into pieces, watching them fall into the trash like the remnants of her marriage. This baby would be hers alone. She would protect this child from the pain of feeling unwanted, from growing up in a home filled with resentment and broken promises. That night, Olivia packed her belongings from the apartment they had shared. Each item she placed in boxes felt like saying goodbye to a version of herself that no longer existed. She found their wedding album tucked in a drawer and allowed herself one moment to flip through the pages. There they were, younger and so full of hope, dancing under string lights, kissing in the rain, laughing like the world belonged to them. She closed the album and left it on the kitchen counter. Some memories were too heavy to carry forward. The following months were a blur of morning sickness, doctor appointments, and the overwhelming task of rebuilding her life from scratch. Olivia moved to a smaller neighborhood across town. Far from the luxury of her former life, she found work as a freelance graphic designer, taking on projects from her laptop. While her belly grew round with life, Rebecca Torres, her best friend since college, became her lifeline. Rebecca was there for every ultrasound, every late-night craving, every moment of doubt. When Olivia wondered if she had made the right choice, it was Rebecca who held her hand in the delivery room when Emma was born. A tiny, perfect, being with her father's green eyes and her mother's determined spirit, looking at her daughter for the first time, Olivia knew she had made the right decision. This little girl would grow up surrounded by love, even if that love came from only one parent. She would never know the pain of watching her parents destroy each other with words and silence. 6 years passed like pages turning in a book. Olivia built a life that was simple but full. Their small house had a garden where Emma loved to play, chasing butterflies and making up elaborate stories about fairy kingdoms. Olivia worked from home, taking on design projects that paid the bills and allowed her to be present for every moment of her daughter's childhood. Emma was bright and curious, always asking questions about everything from why the sky was blue to where babies came from. When she asked about her father, Olivia gave vague answers. "He lives far away. Maybe someday you'll meet him." The lies tasted bitter, but they were easier than the truth. Meanwhile, across the city, Julian Pierce had built an empire. His company had grown from a modest startup to a major player in commercial real estate. His face appeared in business magazines. His name was spoken with respect in boardrooms across the country. He had achieved everything he thought he wanted. Yet success tasted hollow. Julian lived in a penthouse that overlooked the city, surrounded by expensive art and designer furniture that felt cold and impersonal. At night, when the business calls ended and the meetings concluded, he found himself thinking about Olivia. He wondered where she was, if she was happy, she ever thought about him. He dated occasionally, elegant women who understood his lifestyle and didn't demand too much of his time. But none of them made him feel the way Olivia once had. None of them challenged him, laughed at his terrible jokes, or saw past the businessman to the man underneath. He had let the best thing in his life slip away because he was too proud, focused on building an empire to notice he was losing his kingdom. The turning point came on a Tuesday afternoon. Julian was scheduled to meet with potential investors at a small coffee shop in a neighborhood he rarely visited. His driver had taken a wrong turn, and they ended up parking near an elementary school. Just as classes were letting out, Julian was reviewing documents in the back seat when something made him look up. Children poured out of the building in a chaos of backpacks and laughter. And there, holding the hand of a small girl with dark curls, was Olivia. His heart stopped. 6 years had passed, but he would recognize her anywhere. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, looking more beautiful than he remembered. But it was the child beside her that made his breath catch. The little girl looked up at Olivia with pure adoration, chattering animatedly about something that made her mother laugh. Julian watched, transfixed, as they walked toward a modest car parked on the street. The child climbed into a booster seat and Olivia carefully buckled her in, pressing a kiss to her forehead. It was such a simple moment, so full of love and normally that Julian felt something crack open in his chest. He should have looked away. He should have told his driver to continue on. But something compelled him to follow as Olivia's car pulled out of the parking lot. They drove through winding streets to a neighborhood of small houses with neat yards. When Olivia parked in front of a blue house with flower boxes in the windows, Julian had his driver stop a few houses down. He watched as the little girl bounced out of the car, racing up the front path. Olivia followed more slowly, calling out something that made the child pause and wait. They disappeared inside together, the door closing behind them on a life Julian suddenly desperately wanted to understand. For 3 days, Julian couldn't stop thinking about what he had seen. He hired a private investigator, telling himself he just needed to know if Olivia was okay. The report came back quickly. Olivia Carter, age 28, freelance graphic designer, lived alone with her 5-year-old daughter, Emma, 5 years old. Julian did the math in his head, counting back to when they had divorced. The timeline was impossible to ignore. Emma had been born roughly 8 months after their separation, which meant Olivia had been pregnant when she signed those divorce papers. When she watched him walk away without a word, the realization hit him like a physical blow. He had a daughter, a child he had never known existed. 5 years of birthdays, first steps, first words, all stolen from him. The anger that surged through him was hot and immediate, followed quickly by a crushing wave of grief for all he had missed. But beneath the anger and grief was something else, a desperate, aching need to know this child, to be part of her life, to somehow make up for the years he had lost, even if he hadn't known they existed. Julian sat in his penthouse that night, staring at the city lights and thinking about the blue house with flower boxes. Somewhere in that house was his daughter, probably sleeping peacefully, unaware that her entire world was about to change. He had built an empire, but he had failed at the only thing that truly mattered. He had let Olivia go. He had let his pride and his ambition destroy the best relationship he had ever had. And now he had a chance, however slim, to make things right. Tomorrow he would go to that blue house. Tomorrow he would face Olivia and demand answers. Tomorrow everything would change. The morning sun cast long shadows across Olivia's small kitchen as she prepared breakfast for Emma. Her daughter sat at the table, coloring a picture of what she claimed was a dragon princess riding a rainbow. Olivia smiled at the creative chaos of colors, her heart swelling with the familiar warmth that Emma always brought to her mornings. The doorbell rang sharp and unexpected. Olivia glanced at the clock. It was barely 8 o'clock in the morning, too early for visitors. She wiped her hands on a dish towel and walked to the door, pulling it open without checking the peephole. Her breath caught in her throat. Julian Pierce stood on her doorstep, looking exactly as she remembered, yet somehow completely different. His hair was shorter, touched with gray at the temples. Lines around his eyes suggested sleepless nights and heavy burdens. He wore casual clothes instead of his usual business attire. Jeans and a simple button-down shirt that made him look more human, more vulnerable. "Olivia," he said, his voice rough with emotion. She gripped the door frame, her knuckles turning white. For a moment, neither of them moved. 6 years of separation stretched between them like an ocean, and Olivia felt herself drowning in memory she had worked so hard to bury. "What are you doing here?" she managed to whisper, her voice barely audible. "I think you know why," Julian replied, his green eyes searching hers. "I saw you 3 days ago at the elementary school. You and your daughter." The emphasis on those last 2 words made Olivia's stomach drop. She had always known this moment might come, but she had never prepared for how it would feel. The protective instinct that rose in her was fierce and immediate. "You need to leave," she said, moving to close the door. Julian placed his hand against it. Not forcefully, but firmly enough to stop her. "She's mine, isn't she? Emma, she's my daughter." The truth hung between them, impossible to deny. Olivia felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had cried enough over Julian Pierce. "Mommy, who's at the door?" Emma's voice called from the kitchen. Olivia's heart seized. She looked at Julian with desperate eyes, silently pleading with him not to do this here. "Not now. Not like this." Something in her expression must have reached him because he stepped back, giving her space. "Please," Olivia whispered. "Not in front of her. Give me time to prepare her." Julian's jaw clenched, but he nodded. "Tonight, after she's asleep, we're going to talk about this, Olivia. I deserve answers." She watched him walk back to his car, a sleek black vehicle that looked out of place on her modest street. Her hands were shaking as she closed the door and returned to the kitchen, forcing a smile for Emma. Just someone asking for directions. "Sweetheart," she lied, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. The day passed in a fog. Olivia went through the motions of caring for Emma, playing with her in the backyard, reading stories, preparing lunch. But her mind was elsewhere, replaying the look on Julian's face, the pain and accusation in his eyes. She called Rebecca, pouring out her panic and whispered sentences while Emma watched cartoons. "He's going to hate me," Olivia said, her voice breaking. "He's going to be angry," Rebecca corrected gently. "But beneath that anger, he's going to be hurt and scared just like you are." That evening, after Emma was tucked into bed with her favorite stuffed rabbit, Olivia sat in her living room and waited. Julian arrived exactly at 8, his knock soft but insistent. She let him in, and they stood in her small living room. 2 people who had once known each other intimately, now facing each other as strangers. "Tell me everything," Julian said, his voice controlled but tight with emotion. "Start from the beginning," so Olivia did. She told him about discovering the pregnancy the day of their divorce, about the torn test in the lawyer's bathroom, about the decision she made in that moment of pain and fear. She explained how she had convinced herself that keeping Emma a secret was protecting her daughter from a father who had seemed so distant, so consumed by ambition, that there was no room for anything else. You had no right, Julian said when she finished, his voice rising despite his obvious efforts to stay calm. No right to make that decision for me to steal 5 years of my daughter's life. You walked away from me. Olivia shot back, her own anger flaring. You chose your business over our marriage. Every night you stayed late at the office. Every weekend you canceled plans. Every time you looked at me like I was an inconvenience. You showed me exactly where your priorities were. I was building a future for us, Julian argued, running his hands through his hair in frustration. Everything I did was so we could have the life we dreamed about. I never dreamed about an empty house and a husband who was never there, Livia countered, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. I dreamed about partnership, about someone who would choose me, not just provide for me. The words hung between them, painful and true. Julian sank onto her couch, his head in his hands. When he looked up, his eyes were red. I failed you, he said quietly. I know that now. I was so focused on proving myself, on building something that mattered, that I didn't see I was losing what mattered most. But that doesn't give you the right to keep my child from me. I know, Olivia whispered, sitting beside him, but keeping distance between them. I know I was wrong. I was scared and hurt, and I made a choice that seemed right at the time. But Julian Emma is happy. She's loved. She's thriving. Without a father, Julianne said bitterly. What have you told her about me? That you live far away. That maybe someday she'll meet you. Well, someday is now, Julian said firmly. I want to be part of her life. I want to know my daughter. Over the following weeks, they worked out an arrangement. Julian would visit on weekends, slowly introducing himself into Emma's world. Olivia prepared her daughter carefully, sitting her down and explaining in simple terms that her daddy was coming to meet her, that he had always loved her even though he had been away. Emma's excitement was palpable and heartbreaking. She drew pictures for Julian, practiced what she would say to him, asked endless questions about what he looked like and what he liked to do. On the day of their first meeting, she wore her favorite dress and stood by the window, watching for his car. When Julian arrived, he knelt down to Emma's level, and Olivia watched something profound happen. Her daughter looked at this stranger with his green eyes that matched her own, and recognition flickered across her face. Not memory, but something deeper, a connection that transcended time and circumstance. Hi, Emma, Julian said, his voice thick with emotion. I've been waiting so long to meet you. Hi, Daddy, Emma replied. And then she did something that made both adults' hearts break and heal simultaneously. She walked forward and wrapped her small arms around Julian's neck in a hug that conveyed forgiveness they hadn't earned in love. They didn't deserve. Julian held his daughter for the first time, and Olivia watched tears stream down his face. She turned away, giving them privacy for this moment that belonged to them alone, and found herself crying too. For the years lost, for the family that might have been, for the complicated, messy beauty of this new beginning. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance of adjustment. Julian came every Saturday, bringing small gifts that showed he was paying attention. A book about dinosaurs because Emma loved them. Art supplies because she loved to draw. A kite that they flew together in the park. Emma's laughter ringing out as it soared against the blue sky. Olivia watched from a distance as Julian learned to be a father. He was patient with Emma's endless questions, attentive to her moods, gentle when she grew tired or cranky. She saw glimpses of the man she had fallen in love with, the one who had been buried beneath ambition and pride. One evening after Emma had gone to bed, Julian lingered at the door. Thank you, he said quietly, for giving me this chance. For raising her to be such an amazing kid. You're good with her, Olivia admitted, surprised by how much she meant it. I'm trying, Julian said. I'm trying to be the father she deserves. The father I should have been from the beginning. Their eyes met, and something passed between them. Not forgiveness yet, but understanding. The first fragile thread of connection being rewoven. As spring turned to summer, the boundaries between them began to blur. Julian started arriving earlier, staying for dinner. He helped Emma with projects, read her bedtime stories, became a fixture in their daily routine. Olivia found herself looking forward to his visits, found comfort in having another adult to share parenting decisions with. One Saturday, they took Emma to the zoo. It felt startlingly normal. The three of them walking together, Emma between them holding both their hands. People who passed probably assumed they were a family, and for brief moments, Olivia let herself imagine it was true. At the penguin exhibit, Emma demanded to be lifted for a better view. Julian hoisted her onto his shoulders, and she squealed with delight. Olivia stood beside them, watching her daughter's joy, feeling Julian's presence like warmth against her skin. "This is perfect," Emma announced from her perch. "We should do this every day." Julian caught Olivia's eye, and the look they shared was complicated, wistful, painful, full of possibility. That evening, after Emma was asleep, they sat on Olivia's small back porch. The summer air was warm, filled with the sound of crickets and distant traffic. Julian reached over and took Olivia's hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "I miss this," he said quietly. "Not just Emma, you. I miss you." Olivia's breath caught. She wanted to pull away to protect herself from the vulnerability that admission created, but she didn't because the truth was she missed him too. Missed the man he used to be, and was surprised to find herself drawn to the man he was becoming. "Julian," she started, but he shook his head. "You don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know these past months being here with you, and Emma, it's shown me what I lost. What I threw away because I was too stupid and proud to see what mattered." "People can't just go back," Olivia said softly. "Too much has happened." "I know," Julian agreed. "But maybe we can go forward. Maybe we can build something new." He leaned closer, and Olivia felt her resolve wavering. His lips were inches from hers when Emma's voice called out from inside the house. "Mommy, I had a bad dream." They pulled apart, the moment broken but not forgotten. Olivia went to comfort their daughter, and Julian followed. The three of them ending up curled together on Emma's small bed, reading stories until she drifted back to sleep. As Julian prepared to leave that night, he paused at the door. "I meant what I said. I'm not giving up on us." Olivia watched him drive away, her heart a complicated tangle of hope and fear. She was falling for him again, despite every rational reason not to. The question was whether she was brave enough to risk her heart a second time. Autumn arrived with a burst of gold and crimson, painting Olivia's neighborhood in warm colors that matched the changing landscape of her heart. 3 months had passed since Julian had walked back into their lives, and the transformation in all of them was undeniable. Emma blossomed under her father's attention, growing more confident and joyful each day. Julian had become a constant presence, his visits extending from weekends to several evenings a week. But it was the shift between Olivia and Julian that felt most profound. The anger that had once defined their interactions had softened into something gentler, more forgiving. They had fallen into an easy rhythm of co-parenting that felt less like an arrangement and more like a partnership. One October evening, Julian arrived with an unusual request. His company was hosting a charity gala, and he wanted Olivia and Emma to attend as his guests. Olivia's first instinct was to refuse to maintain the careful boundaries she had constructed. But Emma's excitement at the prospect of wearing a fancy dress, seeing her daddy's work, made saying no impossible. The night of the gala, Olivia stood before her mirror, hardly recognizing herself. She had borrowed a midnight blue dress from Rebecca. There's something elegant and simple that made her feel beautiful for the first time in years. When Julian arrived to pick them up, the look on his face confirmed what the mirror had whispered. "You're stunning," he said, his voice filled with wonder. Emma twirled in her own dress, a pink confection that made her look like a little princess. "Daddy, do I look pretty too?" "You're the most beautiful girl in the world," Julian assured her, scooping her up for a kiss on the cheek. The gala was held in a grand ballroom that took Olivia's breath away. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing light across marble floors, and elegantly dressed people mingled beneath soaring ceilings. This was Julian's world, one of wealth and influence that felt foreign to Olivia now, but Julian never left their side. He introduced them to colleagues and investors, his hand resting protectively on the small of Olivia's back. When people asked about their relationship, he didn't hesitate. "This is Olivia. Emma's mother, he would say, and then add with unmistakable warmth, and the woman I'm trying very hard to win back. Livia's cheeks flushed at the admission, but she couldn't deny the flutter of hope it inspired. Throughout the evening, she watched Julian navigate this world of power and money, but noticed how he kept checking on Emma, how he seemed more interested in making sure they were comfortable than in networking or impressing anyone. David Pierce, Julian's business partner, approached them during dinner. He was a kind man with gentle eyes who had always treated Olivia with respect even during the divorce. "It's good to see you again," David said warmly. "And this must be Emma. Julian talks about you constantly." "Really?" Emma asked, delighted. "Really?" David confirmed, smiling at Julian. "He's become quite the devoted father. Leaves meetings early, skips business trips, actually takes weekends off. We hardly recognize him." Julian looked slightly embarrassed, but Olivia felt something warm unfold in her chest. This was proof that his commitment wasn't just words, but he was making real changes in his life. After dinner, music filled the ballroom for dancing. Julian extended his hand to Olivia, his eyes asking a question that went beyond the dance. "May I?" Olivia placed her hand in his, and he led her to the floor. Emma stayed with David, happily eating dessert and chattering about her favorite cartoons. On the dance floor, Julian pulled Olivia closer than was strictly necessary, and they moved together to the soft music. "Thank you for coming tonight," Julian said quietly. "Having you both here means everything to me." "Emma had a wonderful time," Olivia replied, trying to keep things light. "And you?" Julian asked, his green eyes searching hers. "Are you having a wonderful time?" Olivia met his gaze, seeing in his face a vulnerability she had rarely witnessed during their marriage. "I am," she admitted. "More than I expected," Julian began, his voice serious. "These past months have been the best of my life. Getting to know Emma, spending time with you, being part of a family again. It's shown me what an idiot I was before. How I took everything for granted." Julie and Olivia started. But he continued, "I know I don't deserve another chance. I know I hurt you deeply, but I'm not the same man I was 6 years ago. Losing you taught me what matters, and if there's even the smallest possibility that you could forgive me, we could try again. I promise I'll spend every day proving I've changed." Olivia felt tears prick her eyes. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this version of Julian was real and lasting. But fear held her back, the memory of past pain creating walls around her heart. "I need time," she whispered. "I need to be sure." "I'll wait as long as it takes," Julian promised, pulling her closer as they swayed to the music. The following weeks tested Julian's promise. Emma came down with a bad flu, and Julian showed up every evening after work. Still in a suit, ready to help, he held Emma while she cried, read her stories when she couldn't sleep, and stayed up late, researching remedies and comfort measures. Olivia watched him be the father she had always dreamed he would be, and felt her defenses crumbling. One evening, exhausted from days of caring for a sick child, Olivia dozed off on the couch. She woke to find herself covered with a blanket, Emma sleeping peacefully in her room, and Julian in the kitchen cleaning up the dinner dishes. The simple domesticity of the scene brought tears to her eyes. "You're awake," Julian said, noticing her. "How are you feeling?" "Tired," Olivia admitted, "but better now." Julian sat beside her on the couch, and Olivia found herself leaning against him, too exhausted to maintain distance. His arm came around her shoulders, and they sat in comfortable silence. The only sound, the quiet hum of the refrigerator and Emma's soft breathing from the bedroom. "I could get used to this," Julian murmured, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "So could I," Olivia whispered back, surprised by how much she meant it. The turning point came on Emma's 6th birthday. Julian had asked if they could throw a party together, and Olivia had agreed. They spent days planning, decorating, baking a cake that listed comically to one side, but tasted delicious. On the day of the party, their small house filled with children's laughter and the joyful chaos of games and presents. As the party wound down, the last guests departed. Emma sat between her parents on the couch, exhausted but glowing with happiness. She looked up at them with serious eyes. "This was the best birthday ever," she announced, "because I had both my mommy and my daddy here together." Then she asked the question that had been building for months. "Are you going to get married again? All my friends have their mommies and daddies living together." Olivia and Julian exchanged glances over her head. The question hung in the air, heavy with possibility. "Would you like that, sweetheart?" Julian asked gently. "Yes," Emma said emphatically. "I want us to be a real family." "We're a real family," Olivia assured her. "No matter what. But I want us to live together," Emma insisted. "I want Daddy to be here when I wake up and when I go to sleep." After Emma was tucked into bed, Julian and Olivia returned to the living room. The house was quiet, littered with wrapping paper and birthday decorations. They stood facing each other, the question Emma had asked still echoing between them. "She's right, you know," Julian said quietly. "We are a family, and I want us to be together, all of us, under one roof, but I know that's a lot to ask." Olivia looked around her small house at the life she had built through determination and sacrifice. It had been enough for so long, just her and Emma against the world. But watching Julian these past months, seeing him show up day after day, proving through actions rather than words that he had truly changed, she realized something important. She didn't want to do it alone anymore. She didn't have to do it alone anymore. "I'm scared," Olivia admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm scared of getting hurt again. Of Emma getting hurt." Julian crossed the distance between them, taking her hands in his. "I'm scared, too. Scared of messing this up, of disappointing you both. But I love you, Olivia. I never stopped loving you, and I love our daughter more than I knew it was possible to love anyone." "You really have changed," Olivia said, looking up into his eyes and seeing the truth there. "Being without you taught me what matters," Julian replied. "And I won't make that mistake again. I promise you, I will choose you and Emma every single day. You will always come first." Olivia felt the last of her defenses fall away. She had been protecting her heart for so long, building walls to keep out the pain. But standing here with Julian, seeing the love and sincerity in his eyes, she realized that real love required courage. It required the bravery to be vulnerable, to risk being hurt for the chance at something beautiful. "I love you, too," she whispered, and then louder, more certain. "I love you, Julian. I think I never stopped even when I wanted to." Julian's face broke into a smile that transformed him, making him look younger, lighter. He cooped her face in his hands and kissed her, soft and gentle at first, then deeper as 6 years of separation and longing poured into that single moment. Olivia kissed him back, feeling like she was coming home after a long journey. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless and smiling. "Marry me," Julian said, not as a question, but as a promise. "Marry me again, and this time I'll do it right. I'll be the husband you deserve, the father Emma deserves." "Yes," Olivia answered without hesitation. "Yes, let's be a family. A real family." They stood wrapped in each other's arms, two broken people who had found their way back to each other through the love of their daughter and the hard work of forgiveness. Outside, autumn leaves danced in the wind, and inside, a family was being reborn. The next morning, they told Emma together. Her squeal of delight could probably be heard across the neighborhood. She insisted on calling Rebecca immediately to share the news, then spent the day drawing pictures of their new family, complete with a house, a garden, and a dog she hoped to get. In the weeks that followed, they began planning their future. Julian sold his cold penthouse, and they searched together for a house that would be theirs. Place where they could build new memories untainted by past hurts. They found a beautiful home with a big yard for Emma to play in, a garden for Olivia, and a home office where Julian could work without isolating himself from his family. They married quietly 6 months later, just the 3 of them, and Rebecca and David as witnesses. Emma served as flower girl and ring bearer, taking her job with utmost seriousness. This time their vows were different, informed by pain and loss and the hard-won knowledge of what really mattered. "I promise to choose you every day," Julian said, his voice thick with emotion. "To never let work or pride come between us. To be present, to listen, to fight for us. I promise to trust you, Olivia responded, tears streaming down her face. To communicate when I'm hurt instead of hiding. To build this life with you as partners. When they kissed, Emma cheered loudly, and they all laughed through their tears as they drove to their new home that evening. Emma chattered excitedly about her new room and the treehouse Julian had promised to build. Olivia reached over and took Julian's hand, marveling at how far they had come. From the pain of divorce and years of separation to this moment of complete joy and hope. That night after Emma was tucked into bed in her new room, Julian and Olivia stood on their back porch looking at the stars. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, and she leaned back against his chest, feeling safe and loved. "Thank you, Julian," whispered into her hair, "for giving me a second chance, for believing in me." "Thank you," Olivia replied, "for proving that people can change, that love can survive anything if you're willing to fight for it." They stood there for a long time. Two people who had been broken but had found their way back to wholeness through love, forgiveness, and the beautiful chaos of family. Emma's drawing from earlier that day was stuck to the refrigerator inside, a child's vision of their family. And Olivia realized that sometimes the best stories were the ones about people who lost their way but found the courage to come home in the distance. Good dog barked and Julian chuckled. "I guess we should start looking at animal shelters tomorrow." "I promised Emma a dog. I promised her a lot of things," Olivia teased. "And I plan to keep every single promise," Julian said seriously, turning her in his arms to face him. "Starting with this one. I promise to love you and Emma every day for the rest of my life. To be present, to be patient, to be the man you both deserve." "I believe you," Olivia said, and she did. Because love wasn't about never making mistakes. It was about learning from them, about growing, about choosing each other again and again, especially when it was hard. As they went inside to begin their new life together, the house that had been empty just hours ago now felt full of possibility, full of laughter and love, and the promise of thousands of ordinary, of beautiful moments to come. Emma's voice called from upstairs. "Mommy, Daddy, can you both tuck me in?" "Coming, sweetheart?" They called back in unison and walked hand in hand up the stairs toward their daughter, toward their future, toward the family they had lost and found again. And in that moment, standing in the doorway of Emma's room, watching her smile at them with pure joy, they both knew that this was what mattered. Not money or status or pride, but this, a child who felt loved. A partnership built on trust and communication and the courage to believe in second chances. The story that began with tears and torn pregnancy, tests and signed divorce papers had found its way to a new beginning. Not a fairy tale ending where everything was perfect, but something better. A real ending where flawed people chose love, chose forgiveness, chose to fight for what mattered most. And as Julian and Olivia tucked Emma into bed together, reading her favorite story and kissing her goodnight, they knew that this was just the beginning. There would be challenges ahead, moments of difficulty and doubt. But they would face them together as a family, stronger for having been broken and brave enough to heal. Outside, the stars shone brightly, bearing witness to a love that had died and been reborn. To a family that had been torn apart and stitched back together with threads of hope and forgiveness. And in a house filled with laughter and light, 3 hearts beat in rhythm. Finally completely home. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to click like, share this story with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more meaningful stories.